Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make an apple cake, and this is what it looks like. This cake is so flavorful. It has lots of chunks of apple, chopped nuts, it's flavored with some ground cinnamon, and what's unique is as soon as the cake comes out of the oven while it's still warm, we're going to brush it with a glaze, and that's going to add even more flavor, and it's also going to make our cake really moist. So the first thing that you will need to do is to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. And then you will need a 9-inch round, it's 23 centimeters. I'm using a springform pan, comes in the two pieces. If you don't have a springform pan, you could just use a 9-inch, 23 centimeter, like round cake pan. That's just as good. So then you could spray your pan with one of those nonstick sprays. Today I'm going to butter it, so I just have a little bit of melted butter, and I'm using a pastry brush. And brush the bottom and the sides. We don't want our cake sticking to the pan. And then, well, you don't have to. I like to make doubly sure that my cake doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan. So I'm going to take a piece of parchment paper and just put that right in there. Okay. So, of course, an apple cake, we need apples. So you will need 1 pound, which is 450 grams of apples, which really is about too large. And so peel, core your apples, and then, as you can see here, I've just cut them into bite-sized chunks. And then what I like to do to stop them browning while we're getting our batter ready is just to take 1 tablespoon of lemon juice and then just toss your apples with that. Whoop. Try to keep your apples in the bowl. And that will help stop the browning. And what you want to do, I'm using Granny Smith today. You want to use a firm textured apple. By that, so that way when it cooks it doesn't turn all mushy. Granny Smith is like one that you can always find year round. Honeycrisp, Braeburn, there's Stayman Winesap, there's lots of different ones, whatever your favorite one. And if you could even use 2 different types if you like to add a more complex flavor to your apple cake. So we did our apples, and then you will also need 3/4 of a cup, 75 grams of nuts. I'm using pecans today. Walnuts is another good choice. I do like to toast my nuts because it really brings out the flavor. So just put them on a baking sheet in the oven for about 8-10 minutes. You can always tell when your nuts have baked enough, you can start to smell them. And then take them out of the oven, let them cool, and then coarsely chop. Like I said, I usually today in pecans, walnuts, although, hazelnuts would be really good here, or even almonds. So it's that. Now, to make the batter, I'm just making it by hand. You could use, your stand mixer with the paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer for this, but, it's easy batter to make. So in a large bowl, I have 1½ cups, which is 195 grams of all-purpose flour. You may know that as plain flour. To that, I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup, 150 grams of granulated white sugar, 1½ teaspoon, 6 grams of baking powder, 1/4 of a teaspoon, 1 gram of salt, and I like cinnamon, apples, to me, just go together. I'm adding 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. If you prefer your apple cake without the ground cinnamon, just leave it out. Or if you want, like maybe instead, add some lemon zest or orange zest to give it a more citrus flavor. So that's pretty simple. And then in another bowl, I have 2 large eggs. It's 100 grams of eggs. Have your eggs at room temperature, and I'm just going to whisk those. And I'm going to add 4 tablespoons, 40 grams of milk. Have your milk at room temperature. You can use, a whole full-fat milk, or today I think I'm using a reduced fat, 2%. You want a little fat, so, you know, I wouldn't use like the skim. It's like water, which we want a little fat in our cake. And then I'm going to add 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of pure vanilla extract. Again, that's for flavoring. You don't want the vanilla flavor, you just leave it out. You could put some almond flavor in there. If you were using almonds, you could use a little bit of almond extract, but be careful with that because it's very strong in flavor. And then for our fat, we're using 6 tablespoons, 85 grams of melted butter. You can use salted or unsalted, either one. Melt your butter and then let it, you know, cool down to room temperature. You don't want it hot. So, it's simple enough. Like I said, you can get out your mixer for this. So now I'm just going to add the wet to the dry. You know, this is such a nice cake to have, you know, for during the week. It's really easy to make, fast, it tastes really good. What's not to like? Okay, just stir that in. Now I'm going to add all my apples, my nuts. You could also add some raisins. That would go really good here too. Or some dried cranberries or cherries. Lots of apples. Okay, that looks good. You want to make sure all your flour is moistened. And we are done. And I did put my springform pan on a baking sheet. It's easier to transport. Plus, whoop. Again, try to get things, keep it in the bowl, put it in the pan. Don't slop. Okay. And then, back of a spoon, or you could use offset spatula. Just flatten that down, nice even layer. Your kitchen is going to smell so good as it bakes. The apples, the cinnamon, oh, make you think of fall. Okay, that looks good. So now, everyone's oven is a little different. I'm going to say 35 to 40 minutes. It's going to rise, it's going to turn a beautiful brown, golden brown. And the best way is a toothpick inserted into the center will come out clean. I do like to rotate my pan front to back about halfway through baking, making sure it's evenly baked because there tends to be hot spots in your oven. So 35 to 40 minutes. So our apple cake is done. Doesn't it look gorgeous? Beautiful golden brown. Toothpick inserted into the center will come out clean. And as you can see, it's just starting to pull away from the sides of the pan. That's another indication that it's ready. So put your pan on a wire rack. We're going to let that cool down. And we're going to make our glaze right away. So in a small saucepan, I have 2 tablespoons, which is 28 grams of butter. And for this, you can use salted or unsalted. I did cut my butter into small chunks so it'll melt faster. And to that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons, 25 grams of granulated white sugar, 2 tablespoons, 25 grams of light brown sugar. And then I'm going to add 1.5 tablespoons of a fruit juice. Now, I'm using lemon juice here. You could use apple juice to accentuate the apple flavor, like I'm using lemon. Give it a little lemon flavor. You could use orange juice, would be very nice as well. And if you wanted to, if you're using like lemon, you could even put a little lemon zest in there, or orange zest to increase the flavor. So I'm just going to heat this up, medium heat. We want the butter to melt and the sugar to dissolve. So I'm going to bring it up to a boil. Let's take a couple minutes. Okay, so we're up to a boil. So I'm going to adjust my heat down. And I want to boil this gently for 1 minute. So I got my timer, turn that on. There's my timer. So we are done. Just take that off the heat. So when you boil it, it kind of reduces it a bit. And what I love is this almost has like, you know, like a caramel flavor, which really is good on this apple cake. So now what we're going to do while this is hot, our cake is still quite hot, I'm going to take a pastry brush and just brush the top of the cake. Like I said, it will keep it nice and moist. And it adds flavor, a lot of flavor in this. Plus it gives it like a nice shiny look to it. And you can put as much or as little as you want on here. And then what I'm going to do is just let this cool down just a little. This cake is really good warm. It's good at room temperature. It's good cold from the fridge, so whatever you'd like. And if you wanted to decorate the top of this, you could put on some chopped nuts, like if you have pecans if you're using pecans, put some chopped pecans on top to add, you know, more a crunch, plus make it look nice. Okay, that looks good. So I'm just going to let this cool down maybe 10, 15 minutes, and then when we come back, we will try some. So I let the apple cake cool about 15 minutes. So now, the first thing you want to do is take either a knife or a flat edge and just run it around the inside. Make sure it's not sticking to the sides of the pan. And then just clasp, and there we have our apple cake. It looks so pretty. I like the shiny glaze on top. Now, if you didn't want the glaze, you can just leave it off. But I think you got to try it. It adds so much flavor and moist texture. So just take a knife. And a lot of time, well, most of the time when you're cutting a cake, always wipe your knife in between cuts. Okay. And got that paper, gotta remember that. There we go. Oh, doesn't that look gorgeous? It's kind of like in between, it's not a pudding cake, but it's wonderfully moist and dense, so it's so there we have it. Now, you can have a plain. You can put a little dusting of powdered sugar, if it's warm, which mine is, but you could have a scoop of vanilla ice cream or caramel ice cream. Or today, one of my favorite things, whipped cream, always goes good. Like I said, you could sprinkle on some chopped pecans. You can decorate it as much or as little as you want. So, gotta have a little cream with that. It's amazing because you look at that cake and it's kind of a homey looking cake, but man, does it pack a lot of flavor. The apples, you need to cut them into bite-sized chunks so that they're really nice and soft, not mushy, because we use that Granny Smith. So they still, like, as you can see, they still hold their shape. So you have that burst of apple flavor, and then the nuts add a lot. And I like the cinnamon. Like I said, you can leave out that, and then your cake won't be so brown because, of course, these ground cinnamon colors your cake. But I would try it with, because it's great. And then, of course, the glaze on top will keep, not only does it add a little bit of almost caramel flavor to your cake, but it'll keep it really moist for days. I do like to store it in the refrigerator. You can also, you can freeze this cake. Freezes beautifully. And like I said, you can have it warm. You could have it at room temperature. If I put it into the refrigerator and it's cold, it is good cold, of course, but I usually pop it into the microwave just to get the little chill off. And then, like I said, plain whipped cream, ice cream. You must try this. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.